Hi, folks. This is Abel James, and thanks so much for listening to the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. Today's episode of the show is with one of the most knowledgeable people in health and fitness, Mr. John Berardi of Precision Nutrition. It's an awesome show, just packed with knowledge. Before we get to the show, I have a very quick request of you guys. So right now, I'm booking up for the next few months a laundry list of awesome guests. We already have a few, but I could always use more. If there's someone who you think would be totally awesome for me to have on the show and interview and grill about whatever subject, please email me. The best way to do that is sign up for my email list at fatburningman.com and then email me, abel@fatburningman.com, and let me know what you'd like to hear. How can I make the show better for you? What guests would you like? Please just use it as a sounding board. I get many emails, so I can't respond to all of them, but I promise that I do read through. So tell me what you'd like. I do this because I want to change the world. I want to help you guys reach your goals. I want to help entertain you. I want to bring the best people in health who are spreading the truth about it to you guys. So please just take a quick moment. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think we could do better and who you'd like to hear on the show. So thanks so much for doing that. Once again, just sign up for my email list and hit reply to the email you get from there at fatburningman.com, or it's abel@fatburningman.com. All right, so John Berardi, for those of you who don't know who he is, you should. He's very highly respected. I follow his work fairly closely, and basically, Precision Nutrition knows what's up. These guys take people who are massively overweight and turn them into super fit people. They understand how the body works. They understand physiology. They make it happen. Not only that, they teach some of the highest performing athletes across the world how to perform even better through nutrition and fitness and specific types of training. So I highly encourage you to check out their work as well as listen to the show. We talk about the pros and cons of intermittent fasting as a fat loss strategy, how to turn yourself into a bona fide guinea pig, and what it's like to tell George St Pierre what to do. No small feat. All right, let's go hang out with John. Folks, we're here with Dr. John Berardi, who's the founder of the world's largest online nutrition coaching company, Precision Nutrition. As an elite nutrition coach and exercise physiologist, Dr. Berardi has coached hundreds of amateur and professional athletes. In the last 3 Olympics alone, his students have collected over 30 medals, 15 of them gold. Is that true? Like, how's it going, John? That's amazing.
We just make these things up. It's amazing. It's going great. Thanks for having me. It's always funny listening to people read my bio. I always feel a little squeamish sitting back and listening. You know, I have to be humble while people list my life accomplishments. But yeah, thanks for letting everyone know who I am. And I'm really excited to be here to chat with you about health, fitness, and all these kind of exciting things we're both into.
Totally. And you're very well respected in this field. I think in a lot of ways you're an influencer of influencers, right? So I know a lot of the top bloggers and authors really pay attention to the stuff that you guys put out. And it's no surprise. Before this call, John and I were talking about my first experience was checking out his free guide on intermittent fasting. And you said over 600,000 people have checked that out, right?
Yeah. I think it went live about 18 months ago. And our goal was, this is such a hot topic and an important topic that we think everyone should know about and read about. Mm-hmm. And so we just made it a free online book. People can download it as a PDF if they want to read it that way and print it out and whatever. But we also created like that cool format that you saw where you can just read it like a book online. Right. You click next page to go to the next page or the next chapter. And people really liked it. They liked the format and they liked the content, and they share it like crazy through social media and all the other venues. And again, I think it's sort of, we just kind of came in at the right time. A few years ago, and people would have thought, oh, intermittent fasting is totally crazy, and they wouldn't have been ready for the idea. And a few years from now, it'll be old hat, but, and I also think it was the concept, which was, I basically made myself a guinea pig for a year, basically trying every type of intermittent fasting that at least seems sane and reasonable, and record everything, mostly. Yeah. And recording everything, right? From blood work to photos to, performance variables to even cognitive measures. people who knew me earlier in my career knew that sort of, a lot of what we taught, and we still teach this to a lot of our clients, most of them, in fact, is the frequent eating thing every few hours, right? And I think it works in some situations for some people fantastically well. But people were really shocked when I went out and put myself through what many people think is the opposite of that, right? Yeah. Which is eating very infrequently, sometimes only once a day, very big meals. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad that you liked it. I'm glad that you found it. And I'm glad that lots of other people are finding it too. So it can hopefully give them some perspective on the intermittent fasting thing.
Yeah. And I've definitely shared it around to a lot of people. I'm sure I'll put a link to it on the blog post for this show. But can you talk a little bit, for the people who haven't seen that, can you talk about what happened to you over the course of time and trying all these different fasting regimes? Because the pictures are shocking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I should probably set the stage with why I did it in the first place. Yeah. And the truth is, I've been doing this for 25 years in health, fitness, coaching people, and concerning myself personally with sort of nutrition and exercise, because it's what I do and it's what I love. So I am sort of the ultimate sort of test pilot of everything that comes out. Any new diet fad, any new training fad, I do myself. At my home, I actually have a gym, 700 square foot gym that, and we have testing equipment from metabolic cart to you name it. It's almost like a little mini exercise physiology lab.
That's awesome.
Right? So I test everything. And we could talk about some fun experiments I got in the pipeline in a few minutes. But, for me, when all of this discussion on the internet in particular around intermittent fasting was taking shape, and a lot of it was super contentious, right? There's just a lot of strong opinions, inflexibility, and
strong personalities.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And, I thought, well, I haven't seen anyone who seems to take a really objective, non-religious approach to this, which is, let me just go in with a completely open mind and no bias in one direction or another and give it a shot. The other thing was, for me, I was actually sort of reinvigorating my athletic career. I was a sprinter when I was younger, and I wanted to start sprinting now that I'm a master's athlete. And some high school friends and I decided we were going to go and make a reunion, and we're going to run the 4x100 meter relay at the Penn Relays, which is one of the world's largest international track meets. And we ran in that particular event together in high school many moons ago. Wow. So now we wanted to come back as master's athletes and run. So for me, who was normally walking around about 195 pounds at about 10 to 12% body fat, I was just too big. Yeah. So I had to find a way to whittle down to 170, 175. And I thought, well, I know how to do this. I used to compete as a bodybuilder. I know how to do physique manipulations, and actually quite extreme ones. I work with UFC athletes and stuff like that. So, but I wanted to see if there were any new ways that I could try that I hadn't explored before. So intermittent fasting was that for me. It was, can I cut down? Can I lose a tremendous amount of body fat while preserving my lean mass, and sort of in a new way, and in a way that was more sustainable? Mm-hmm. Because I could rip down like a bodybuilder would, but we all know what happens about 3 weeks after the bodybuilding contest. You blow back up, right? Yeah. I wanted to sustain this for a period of years so I could compete. So that was the intention. And so, what I did was I took blood measures, I had a daily journal. I recorded every morsel of food I put in my mouth. Yeah. I recorded every workout that I did, and I logged it, and we published it. And, over the course of the experiments, I tried about 6 or 7 different intermittent fasting protocols. Everything from a once a week, 24-hour fast to a daily 18-hour fast to even a daily 20 to 22-hour fast. And I just wanted to see what happened. And some of the protocols were fantastic. I felt like this is sustainable. I could do this, for a good portion of my life. And it works, and I feel good on it. Some of them were a total train wreck, and they left me just literally obsessing about food all day. Like any free minute I had, I wanted to read cookbooks and was fantasizing about Dairy Queen and stuff. And that's not sane or healthy. Yeah. And but in the end, I found a couple protocols that worked great. I ended up losing a tremendous amount of body fat. Now, when I give the numbers, people always say, oh, that's impossible. But, I have an ultrasound device that's highly reproducible. And so I started the experiment in the 8% range. And by the end, my ultrasound device was reading me between 3 and 4% body fat. Now, whether that absolute number is correct or not, you can see from the photos, I lost a lot of fat. Yeah. And so I got in perfect racing weight. It was completely shredded, and that was interesting. But, I reported on testosterone levels and all the other things. So it was actually a really cool experiment for me, and it actually helped add a new tool in my nutrition toolbox, if you will, which is during certain times of the year, I may use intermittent fasting for specific purposes. Now, the conclusion was there's going to be certain people that it's absolutely not for, and certain situations where it's not right either. It could be great for you this year, but next year not so great because you have a lot of lifestyle stressors, or maybe you have a new baby at home, or you take on a new job, or something that would prevent it from being a good fit. And I think this is the meta lesson that I like people to get from any nutrition discussion, which is if something worked for you for now, that's great. Yeah. But to suggest that it would work for everyone in every situation forever is I'm dubious of that. Yeah. So it was an interesting set of trials for sure.
Absolutely. So quickly, for the people out there who might want to dabble in it, what sort of conclusions did you walk away with? What is a responsible way to get started, or what's more a really advanced strategy that works really well for people who can handle it?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think for people who are brand new to paying attention to nutrition, so you just decided, hey, I'm going to pay attention to this aspect of my life and get it handled. I wouldn't even start with intermittent fasting. What I would do is I would start with sort of what more frequent eating, actually quite the opposite in some cases. I mean, you still want to make fantastic food choices and you want to eat around your exercise appropriately and things like that. But I like the idea of getting those frequent opportunities each day to make healthy choices, because when you're choosing a new eating lifestyle, you're not just thinking about the food, you're thinking about the whole meta aspect of your life and how it fits into it. So you have to consider that you're practicing eating healthy as well as eating healthy, right? You're establishing a practice.
That's a really good
every
point.
Single time you eat. So I love the idea of, for people very new, starting with a little bit more frequency of eating. I'm not saying be a slave to the every 2-hour thing, but eating more frequently, taking more chances to practice making good choices. So that's the first thing. For people who are a little more advanced and want to get started, I think you have to make sure you start intermittent fasting when your lifestyle stressors are better managed. Yeah. Like if you're in a really stressful situation and you're training your butt off 5-6 times a week, it's probably not a good time to start another major stressor, which is intermittent fasting. It's a recipe for disordered behavior. It's a recipe for, if you want to call it, adrenal fatigue, and a host of other physiological consequences that people don't like. The other thing is, there's a lot of debate about this, but in women, there's some caution as well. Women have a very delicate reproductive system that is fine-tuned to energy balance. So what ends up happening is when people intermittently fast, they end up eating less in many cases than they would otherwise. And in women, if that less is too less, and if they're exercising hard, they end up upsetting the reproductive balance. And when that happens, it's not just about producing estrogen and making babies, right? It's about the feedback system to your brain. And that's when women get what we call crazy brain, right? There's this tremendous signal, like we need to make more reproductive hormones and make you fertile. Yeah. So we're going to get your brain thinking any kind of thoughts that will get us there, right? So that'll mean obsessing over food. That'll mean obsessing over body image. So we're cautious about that. It's not to say that women shouldn't try it. It's just caution. And then the other thing is you have to make sure that the other factors in your life are supportive of this. For example, I have 2 young children at home, a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son. And my wife doesn't practice intermittent fasting. So I had to figure out a way to make that work within the context of what I have at home, right? I can't be like, oh, breakfast? I don't eat that. You guys are on your own. Lunch? Yeah, I skip that one too. Right. I only eat my meals at 9 p.m. and I eat 5,000 calories and it takes me an hour and a half. So you guys are going to have to bend around that. Okay. Okay, kids, you know? So I feel like you have to factor all this in, you know, and when a lot of experts talk about food, they talk about it in a vacuum. You know, independent of what's going on in your life and in my life and all the factors. So if I sit up here and tell you, you should do this because it works for me or my clients, it's very hard to say you should do to someone else, really,
Right.
because what I'm really saying is, well, in my experience with the people I've seen and the lifestyle I have, this works. And that's the best you can do.
So on that subject of self-testing, which I think it's a really exciting time for that, because there are all these startups coming out where you can test all these different biomarkers, you know, for $49 or for free. And it's really coming to the end consumer. What do you recommend for people in terms of, I guess, a system of thinking around, like, does this work for me or does this not work for me? So for example, like a woman who starts fasting, she might be getting shredded and she can see a six-pack on herself for the first time. She's excited, but she's a train wreck, right? And is having all of these, you know, problems both mentally and physically. So she might think that it's working, right? But it's actually not really working, or it's working in certain ways. How do you, what's your thought process around that, especially with the people who you coach?
Well, you know, I think, well, what you said last there is perfect, which is coaching. I think coaching is essential. If you're pretty new to this and you don't know what to evaluate, it's awesome to have someone to check in with.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly the accountability piece to make sure you're following it. But then there's also that sort of wisdom that's associated with having experience and perspective that you just don't often have about yourself, in particular if you don't have a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Right? So my first thing is, I don't know why anyone would embark in a major lifestyle change without at least someone to check in with who knows what they're doing. You know, just a little bit of coaching. And I'm not saying you have to like take a second mortgage on your home to hire coaching, right? What I am saying is that there may be someone that you can find that you can check in with once a month, you know, or it's like personal training. The notion in people's minds is, yeah, but that's so expensive because every time I go to the gym, I have to pay $100 for someone to work out with me. Well, I'm like, well, that's only one model. Like you could actually hire a personal trainer to just start with you every new exercise phase. So it might be every 8 weeks you check in with someone once or twice. That's not very expensive. So anyway, the idea is just, you know, start off with some coaching. If you feel like you don't even know how to answer the question, how do I evaluate if something's working? Find someone who knows how to do that and spend a little time with them. So that's the first step. The second step would be start to apply the scientific method. And that sounds all, you know, science-y for the guys in the lab coats and stuff, but it's actually just a system of thinking. And, you know, as someone with children at home, my kids use the scientific method every single day when they reality test, right? When they try and come up with hypotheses for how things work in the world, right? So like when they look at something and they're like, that's new to me. How do I figure that out? Will it work if I do this? Will it work if I do this? So children's minds are scientific. We all have a scientific method in our heads. We just have to sort of explicitly say what we're doing. So the thing is, we have to control some variables. So if you want to see if intermittent fasting is working, it's probably not the perfect time to also change your training program, you know, and change a whole bunch of other things. But beyond even this sort of this procedural thing, you know, I think the biggest thing is attention and awareness. And I always hesitate to use some of these words because they're kind of wrapped up in new agey philosophies that people get squeamish about, right? Right. But really, it's just paying attention to your life, right? So if you're someone and you're trying a new intermittent fasting thing, and you're only paying attention to your six-pack or your abs and how that's shaping up, you're missing the rest of the stuff. You know what I mean? So paying attention to things like your mood and not just sort of bulldozing through it, you know? And in the hardcore training community, whether that's you're a CrossFitter or whether you're into powerlifting or whether you're into bodybuilding or whether you're into like high intensity sports, it's very common to train ourselves to ignore physiological feedback. Right? Because it hurts to go hard in the gym. And so your body's kind of telling you, wait, this kind of sucks. You should probably stop now. And you're like, no. I'm training myself to ignore that so I can, improve my Fran time or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And that's okay in a certain context where it's safe and protective. But in the context of the rest of your life, the rest of your physiology, it's really important to listen to those cues and signals. And so that's why when people say, pay attention to your hunger signals, that's one of the best things you can do nutritionally. So you eat until you're just short of full, and then you eat again when you start getting hungry. And people are like, yeah, well, if I listen to my hunger signals, I'd be 400 pounds because I'm always hungry, right? But the truth is, someone who says that simply doesn't know how to listen to their signals.
Yeah.
And there's ways of getting at this. I mean, some people use meditation as a way to get at paying attention to themselves.
Right.
But you don't have to do that particular strategy. One thing we use with our coaching is just simply, for a short period of time, purposefully eating very slowly. So taking 15, 20 minutes to finish a normal meal, whereas you might have taken 5. By doing that, you start to see your attention open wide up. Mm-hmm. And it's really, really impressive because you also start to tune into your actual physical signals. It takes about 20 minutes anyway for us to feel satiety or fullness from a meal. Mm-hmm. And I know if I'm eating quickly, I could easily get 5,000, 6,000 calories in that amount of time. Right? But if I'm eating slowly, I let my body sort of take in what it needs.
Right.
And then I actually can have the opportunity to sense into that. And then once we get to that stage, we can practice things like, we'll try eating to 80% fullness instead of 100%. And 80% for us is satisfied, whereas 100% is stuffed.
Yeah.
Right? So it's that those little practices that help you tune in. So again, for someone wanting to sort of experiment and see if things are working, the first thing is just find a way to get attuned to yourself, so that you can actually pay attention to all the things that you need to pay attention to. And then the other thing is get some help, get some coaching, So that's kind of my best advice around that.
I think that's awesome advice. Not enough people, I'm guilty of this too, being way too cavalier at the beginning and being like, I got this and I'm tracking all these things, but you're paying attention to the wrong things. You're giving some of them too much weight and you're ignoring other pieces. And so, yeah, I think getting a coach or at least someone who knows what they're talking about to guide you through the process, even if you're checking in every once in a while, is really important.
Well, what you're highlighting is awesome. It's the difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? Mm-hmm. Knowledge is just knowing stuff. And this is a particularly important topic for me. And it has, this sort of idea of being able to cultivate nutritional wisdom, at least professionally for me, started when I started working with lots of clients. And,
mm-hmm.
and through our coaching programs online, we're coaching more people than any other group in the world right now. In the last 5 years, we've coached 20,000 people online directly with coaches.
Yeah.
And when you start working with that number of people coming from all different walks of life, it's 100 different countries now.
Wow.
You start to see some amazing patterns emerge, and you see some just different things, right? And you start to realize that these clients are sort of accepting information from all over the place, from media, from online, from magazines and stuff. And they're not necessarily just looking to get in shape or to tell me what to eat.
Yeah.
They need some help sort of curating the information that's out there, right? They need some help figuring out what matters and what doesn't. Mm-hmm. And when you say sort of people tend to be a little more cavalier in the beginning and they start measuring everything, and it's simply because they don't know what's important. Yeah. And that's what wisdom is, saying from the entire menu of options out there of what I can pay attention to and what I can try, there may be only 2 or 3 things that are really important right mm-hmm. now. So cultivating that wisdom is the best thing that we can do as self-experimenters, as nutrition or fitness professionals. It's starting to figure out not what's new or what's next or what else is out there, but among all the things that's out there, what actually makes a difference, what matters, And I think that's really awesome when you start thinking that way.
Right. So we'll get to that in a second. I just realized we're wearing like what seems to be exactly the same shirt, a black V-neck. It's very
I know
becoming, John.
it's a go-to podcast show.
Looks better on you. No, it reminds me, I had Matt Lalonde on the show and I was having a particularly bad hair day. And so like my hair was all like spiked up and he's like the king of spiky hair. So like the webcam video of us beside each other was absolutely ridiculous. I'm sure.
That's hilarious.
So this is ridiculous in a different way. But I did want to talk to you about, I mean, 20,000 people, that's ridiculous. Emily wrote down for me, she said that your followers, the people who you've coached with your program, have lost more than The Biggest Loser and a lot of these mainstream places. What is for someone who's an expert in manipulating the body, especially if you're taking someone and leaning down for like a bodybuilding championship or something like that, like how do you combine knowing everything about that and knowing that it's possible with people who, 90% of people, or maybe even more than that, who fail on diets, who believe that they cannot manipulate their bodies, that's kind of a negative term, but I think you kind of can see where I'm going with this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
you know that it's possible, but most people don't believe it. Right. So what do you do with that?
Well, I think it's a totally different skill set, right? I mean, working with highly motivated athletes is as simple as understanding biochemistry and, systematic approach to body change. It's physiology, right? So you say, oh, here's the plan. You go do this and send me pictures and I'll change it when it needs to be changed. And there's like a certain subset of the population. It might be 2% of the world who you could actually do that with. And those are the people who gravitate towards bodybuilding, competitive athleticism, and all that sort of a thing, right? Probably many of the people who listen to your show, right, are those types of people who are like, hey, you know what? I just don't get these people who just simply can't eat more vegetables. Like, what the hell's wrong with them, right? But that's a different type, right? I mean, the type of person who would literally just do whatever I told them to do. I mean, there's certain value in that, right? Because they have extremely lofty goals. So then it's just up to me to make sure they have the right prescription. But the rest of the people, and this is the interesting part, to me, these are the people that actually need the help, because the highly disciplined people, they'll probably get in shape themselves without me anyway. Yeah. They'll find a way, right? They have this drive and this discipline that will lead them to figure out a way. So they actually don't need me. I maybe can facilitate some things for them, make it happen a little faster. But the people who actually need professionals like me are the type that you mentioned, the people who really, really struggle to just get started in the first place. And that skill set is, you could call it a psychological one, but I think that devalues the skill set itself. Really what it is what I like to call a progressive model of nutrition. And the analogy I make is this. If you're new to the gym, no one would expect you to just pick up a bar and start doing snatch, right? Like your strength coach wouldn't be like, hey, okay, here, watch me. And then, right? Now you do it, right? You're just not going to you're not going to take, I mean, some people might, but a good coach won't take that approach. Right? Because there are a series of very complicated movements and neural patterns that have to be trained to get to that place. So maybe it's a 6 or 8 week progression and you chunk out the movements and you make sure there's no movement restrictions and that sort of a thing. And you look at sort of limiting factors. Why don't we do that in nutrition? It drives me totally bonkers, right? I mean, you're like, all right, cool. Paleo is the best. So someone who comes in and wants to get in shape, we're like, you got a paleo. Okay, cool. What do I do to paleo? Well, you just have to laundry list of things. It's essentially the equivalent of me being a highly trained and competent Olympic lifter, telling someone to just, well, all you have to do is just pick up the bar, shrug, flip it, and you're done, man. What the hell's wrong with you? You can't do this. So for us, it was, how can we do the same thing in nutrition? Can we create a progression model? What's the first thing that a beginner needs to know or do so that they can build upon that next? And for us, it's part of this is thinking of it in terms of limiting factors. And a limiting factor is something that stands in the way of basically unlimited progress, right? So if there weren't limiting factors in the world, professionally, nutritionally, physically, we would just get better in a linear fashion all the way to eternity, right? We just keep getting better. But there's always something you butt up against, right? I mean, it could be genetics, it could be whatever. So what we're looking for are limiting factors for people. So when they start nutritionally, what is their limiting factor? What's the thing that prevents them from feeling motivated or from actually, producing the right amount of insulin in response to a meal, whatever it might be? And we look at that. And for us, it actually begins with deficiencies. If you look at the North American population in particular, but it's starting to be true globally, there are a series of deficiencies that almost every person who doesn't pay attention to food has. I mean, a lot of people are dehydrated, so that's a water deficiency. We see tons of protein deficiencies, essential fatty acid deficiencies, and then we see deficiencies in a host of vitamins and minerals. There was a study published not too long ago in the Journal of for the International Sports Nutrition Group, and when they looked at hundreds of people and they looked at a breakdown of their nutritional plans and their intake, not a single one of them had a completely adequate diet. And these were people actually following popular diets, paleo, the Mediterranean diet, and on, right? So there wasn't a single person they found who had completely adequate, deficiency-free intake.
Wow.
Right? So it's enlightening. The idea that if we were to fix some of these deficiencies right out of the gate, people would start feeling better immediately. And a great example I always give of this is when you give prison inmates a fish oil pill and a multivitamin every day, the incidence of violent behaviors goes down like 60%.
That's nuts.
And so then they said, well, wait a second, what exactly is going on here? Because it's not like the doses weren't high enough that they were getting like some super B vitamin influx or something, right? Well, we're just fixing deficiencies. So what if we gave it to kids? And the same exact thing happens. ADHD behaviors, violent behaviors on the playground, all these things are improved dramatically. And what I think we're really just looking at is not this mystical power of fish oil, but it's just the elimination of a deficiency makes a human being behave, act, and function properly again. So that's the first step. What are the deficiencies we can get rid of? And then people start to feel things like motivation. That's why in our coaching program, for example, the first habit we have people follow is take essential fatty acid supplement. And is it the most sort of holistic nutritional practice? That's debatable. But what ends up happening is we get rid of a deficiency that's standing in their way immediately. And then we introduce other things to get rid of deficiencies. And then we start talking about things like, what's the right carb, protein, fat ratio for you and that sort of a thing. So it's a bit of a triage process, right? It's what is where are you bleeding the most right now? Let's deal with that. Okay. And the thing is, once you fix those things, in particular deficiencies, all of a sudden those people who couldn't follow a diet before, who couldn't find the motivation to get to the gym, all of a sudden are excited about going to the gym. You're like, wait a second, this person doesn't need psychotherapy. They just need a healthy functioning system that feels the appropriate amount of energy and the appropriate amount of motivation. So I think that's where a lot of us are missing the ball. We think it's either physiological or psychological. And we know that the two affect each other, but we're not sure how, so we can't be prescriptive about it. And for us, we've really honed in on that. There are some things. And if we fix a vitamin mineral deficiency and an essential fatty acid deficiency right out of the gate, within 2 weeks, you're ready to start going to the gym. In a way you might not have been before.
Right. So I'd love to shift gears a little bit and ask you a very loaded question, if you don't mind.
Okay, load up.
So clearly things have been getting worse for the past few decades, like very rapidly. The amount of obese children, adults, we're all getting fatter and sicker, aside from this kind of like sliver of nutritionists and people who are interested in physiology or bodybuilding, like you said before. Why are things so bad right now?
Well, it's because, everyone's not paleoing, right? I'm just kidding. I say that because it's kind of the antithesis of the right answer, right? The right answer is well, why are things getting so bad? I mean, it's a massive cultural shift, right? I mean, we can say it's because people aren't moving enough because they sit in front of computers all day, right? We can say it's because they have access to processed, high sugar, low nutritional value foods. And that's also true. And it's also true because of those two things, their physiologies just don't work anymore, right? Their ability to handle nutrients that come in, their ability to produce insulin appropriately and leptin and adiponectin and these types of things. But fundamentally, I just think it's the way that the structure of our North American lifestyle works, right? I mean, we simply have to purposefully find ways to move, right? And in the past, that was never an issue, right? We had to move to do everything that we needed to do. Nowadays, we only move when we force ourselves to move.
Yeah, it's so bizarre.
It's totally, in contrast to anything we've ever experienced. And the same thing true with nutrition. In the past, overnutrition wasn't a big issue. And I don't even mean like our, distant past, only a couple decades.
Right.
And access to the types of foods that produce health wasn't so difficult as well. I mean, nowadays you're like, where's the only place I can feel safe finding food? You have to go to like artisan markets and farmers markets and stuff. And again, it becomes like the ultimate, it's expensive, but it's like the ultimate like hobby to have to find food that's like natural and pesticide free and all that stuff. So this is why the sliver keeps getting smaller, because it feels like you have to make it a hobby nowadays to seek out movement and clean, healthy, unprocessed food. And I think until we find ways structurally to societally incentivize and make it easier to do those other things, we're going to keep going down this path. And so, it becomes like a policy thing, and I don't want to rail against the big food manufacturers and stuff like that, because it's even bigger than that, right?
Yeah, it is.
It's because we're actually voting for them when we purchase food, when we choose less expensive foods. And even that perspective is narrow, because the assumption is the entire world is choosing to spend less on food when they have more discretionary income to spend more on it. And that's simply not true. People who choose to shop organic tend to have much higher incomes than, 99% of the rest of the world who are just barely able to afford any food in the first place.
Right.
So, it's a complicated problem, obviously. What are we trying to do to fix it? Well, it's when someone is ready to actually think about and pay attention to this, we try and give them the smallest, most sustainable, most manageable habits that they can practice to start moving the needle in the right direction. So what is the minimum amount of exercise for them to do so that they can start doing well, feeling well? What is the minimum nutritional intervention? It's certainly not organic free range, right? That is a big intervention because it's expensive and it's a hobby to go seek it all out, right? So what are those minimal things? And, that's all we can do when people start coming to us in this capacity, at least us at Precision Nutrition as a coaching company. Societally, though, it has to be top-down stuff, right? It has to be but it can't just be in the policymakers' hands. We have to start voting for the things as well that we find important, that encourage us to move, that encourage us to not eat cheaper, lower quality alternatives that wreck our physiology. So, I'm not sure that I have the training to solve that particular issue.
So I know you have a keen eye for trends and that sort of thing. Do you envision, if you can put your little, if you look into your magic ball right now, are things going to get better soon? What can we do to change this?
Well, one thing that I'm really excited about is what I've been calling sort of fitness 2.0, right? And the idea is, if we do just a quick little walk through like the last 50 years, about 40, 50 years ago, fitness beta started. And that was like, you go for a jog or you do some aerobics tapes. You know what I mean? So that was how people got in shape when they wanted to have this project of getting in shape. So it was Jane Fonda workouts, or, you go for a run, right? The sweatbands and the short shorts. And then in the 90s, which is kind of becoming scarily long ago, the health club
Right.
Fitness 1.0 happened, where when you wanted to get in shape, you actually had to go join a gym. You had to go to a place where you're essentially renting exercise equipment, right? And if that didn't work, you had to hire a personal trainer, right? So you had to go to a building and do this thing, right? This workout at a gym.
Right.
For me, this next generation, and we're seeing it crop up all over the place, is what I'm calling Fitness 2.0. So it's the sort of like liberating fitness from the gym. Right? So it's how can you take fitness with you? And, there are some great free now apps that literally stream like customized workouts that you just prop up your phone on like a counter somewhere and you can just jump around and do the workout. You know what I mean?
That's cool.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we just did an app with George St Pierre. It's called Touch Fit. And it basically asks, you have to do a fitness test in the beginning and ask some questions about you. And from that, it actually generates a live streaming real-time workout that you can follow along with. It's a body weight based workout. You tell it how long you have to work out. So all of a sudden, I mean, this is as high level as it gets, right? You get a workout designed for your level, for the time you're willing to spend today. Yeah. And it just shows you what to do in real time. You just watch George and you do it along with them. And at the end of the workout, it asks you to rate each exercise how difficult it was for you. So it then adapts to your competency. So next time, if the workout was really hard, it makes it easier. And if it was really easy, it makes it harder. So, and this is the thing, right? It's customized, it's portable, it's mobile. You don't need a gym for it. It costs $7. you pay for it once, $7. And that's it.
Yeah.
And this to me is sort of the future of, now, I mean, not every person wants to get in shape is going to go down this sort of app route, but the idea that we can use our mobile devices and take fitness away from the gyms and that sort of a thing, I think is making fitness cheaper and more, I guess, sort of less exclusionary.
Yeah.
To people who might not have ever had access to it. Because even the workout, like the Jane Fonda tapes back in the day, they were cheap to buy. But honestly, when you look at these videos, they're just a bunch of skinny ladies in leg warmers and guys with like feathered up hair. So even if you could afford that, like it's not accessible to me. I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I want.
I want me some of that.
Exactly. So, and it's not just me. I mean, there's overweight people looking at that too. And they're going, oh, this is certainly not for me. So it wasn't exclusionary, it was group exclusionary. Okay? So nowadays we don't have that anymore. People love to throw around the democratizing fitness or whatever. But essentially the thing is, it's just making it more accessible. And I think that's a huge shift. And the same stuff happening with nutrition as well. Inexpensively, without any geographic limitations. If you need to go to a physical space, you can get world-class advice. And it's inexpensive. And it can change your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're coming up on time, but very quickly, I would love to know what it's like to work with George St Pierre. Because that sounds freaking amazing.
George is a fantastic guy. I met him for the first time in 2006. I think it was 2006, leading up to his second fight with BJ Penn. So for UFC fans, they'll probably remember that. And we've been working together ever since. It's easy. I mean, it's awesome. It's easy, right? George is a fantastic guy. And he is in a position to create the structures in his life for success. Yeah. So when it comes to nutrition, right, I don't have to be like, hey, George, did you eat your vegetables this week? I mean, we have a local service that provides his meals for him. They just drop him off at the gym. So when he's done eating, his post-workout meal is there for him. Now, not everyone can have this, but for the people who can, it's a fantastic thing, So I help create the philosophy and the idea behind the menus. We have a fantastic chef who creates the most delicious meals you can imagine. So even when this guy's cutting weight the final week before a fight, we're at the hotel, like eating gourmet meals. They're just like perfectly designed for him to cut, 20 pounds in 5 days. And again, the guy he's highly disciplined, but that doesn't really even capture him extremely well. It's just, that makes it easy for him to do the training and the nutrition stuff. What really captures him is he's just a lifelong learner. He's extremely curious. And he takes a very engaged approach with his own fitness. So he wants great advice. His head's always up. He's always listening. He's always looking for things that can help him improve. So every opportunity that he has is an opportunity to get better as a fighter and as a human being. So it's a real treat to work with a guy like that.
It sounds like a pretty good model for people to strive for, especially if they're getting started. Keep your head up, listen, always know how to improve, always be looking for that. That's what
absolutely.
For.
And part of that is just his general philosophical approach. Like the guy likes to play chess and he likes to read philosophy and he likes to, again, whether he would call it this or not, what I like to call it is cultivate wisdom.
Yeah.
So take an active approach to learning to practice wisdom in your life. So rather than just collecting information or just putting your head down and bulldozing through life, it's how can I, actually cultivate this concept of understanding, curating knowledge, and becoming wise. And I think it's a practice that you have to do every single day. And he's a guy who has it.
Yeah, so cool. Well, we're just about out of time, but before we go, why don't you tell folks out there what you guys are working on now or what you're working on next and where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the two big things we're doing is obviously our coaching. So we have a fat loss coaching program called Lean Eating and a muscle building program called Scrawny to Brawny. And obviously two different groups, but both in the same direction, which is helping people change their lives in a really positive way. For the scrawny guys, it's, build muscle, build strength, and build a bigger life. And for our lean eating folks, it's lose weight, it's get a handle of your eating. And your nutrition and that sort of a thing. And the other thing is we have a professional certification for fitness pros. So this is actually a huge part of our business. And every year we certify about 6,000 fitness professionals through our precision nutrition certification. So this all generated from people saying, well, those results you guys get in your coaching programs, like, I love to learn how to do that. And we said, okay. So it was a tug from the community saying like, hey, can you create something? So we did. We created a really, really high quality 600-page textbook that covers everything you need to know about nutrition on a professional level. And then we have like video lectures and the whole deal. So I know we're running out of time. I don't want to go on and on about that, but those are the two big things we're working on. And then we're always just working on ways to get better at that, to help more people, to touch more lives, to change more lives in a positive way. So whether that's our students or our clients or whatever the case may be. And as always, we're running crazy experiments. So we just finished our bigger, smaller, bigger project where one of our team members gained 20 pounds of lean mass in a month, lost it all in 5 days and put it all back in 24 hours. And this was all a test project for what happens with MMA type athletes.
Yep.
And we have a couple cool other projects on the horizon, which if people follow along our Facebook or our website, they'll be able to see. One we're working on right now is a frequency of training project. And the question is basically, if I work out once a day for an hour, or 5 times a day for 1/5 of that hour, or 15 times a day for 1/15 of that hour, which would be tantamount to like one set every hour or so, what's the difference metabolically, hormonally? Those types of things. So we're testing that right now. And that may lead to some cool interventions. Like it may take that sort of, you have to go to the gym for an hour every single day and say, what if you could get the same or better results with just 5 short workouts in a day that last 5 minutes? So we're looking at those kind of questions as well.
Any quick teaser on that? Is it going in any particular direction?
Top secret. This one's top secret.
All right, John, thank you so much for coming on. This is a blast. You're one of the most knowledgeable people in this area. For those of you out there who haven't already, be sure to check out his website, check out his stuff. I'll link to the fasting book and some other resources. But thank you so much, John. You're welcome anytime.
That's awesome. Thanks for having me. I love the fact that you reached out and asked me to be on the show. I love the show. So, whenever you want to hear from me, just let me know. Be happy to do it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John.
All right. Take care.
You too.